When vaccine researcher Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived at her Madrid laboratory to publish groundbreaking safety data, she vanished without a trace. Her computer was found still logged in, with a half-finished report glowing on the screen, coffee still warm. No security alerts, no forced entry, no backup copies. For 4 years, her research remained buried in corporate files until a janitor's discovery revealed a massive pharmaceutical cover-up. What they found will make you question everything you thought you knew about trust. When vaccine researcher Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived at her Madrid laboratory on February 3, 2020, she had no idea she was walking in her final day as a free woman. By 6:47 that evening, her computer was still logged in, a half-finished safety report glowing on the screen. Her coffee sat on the desk, still warm to the touch. The security system showed no alerts, no forced entry, no signs of struggle. But Dr. Elena Rodriguez was gone. For 4 years, her groundbreaking research remained buried in corporate files, her name reduced to whispers in pharmaceutical boardrooms. Her daughter Sophia left with nothing but questions that no one would answer. The woman who had dedicated her life to vaccine safety had simply vanished from the face of the earth, taking with her data that could have changed everything. That is, until March 15, 2024, when a night janitor named Carlos Mendez knocked over the wrong filing cabinet. What he found hidden behind that false panel would expose a conspiracy so massive, so carefully orchestrated, that it reached into the highest levels of international pharmaceutical companies. Documents that revealed Elena hadn't disappeared by choice. She hadn't walked away from her life, her work, or her 7-year-old daughter. She had been removed. The cache of evidence Carlos discovered told a story that pharmaceutical executives had spent 4 years and millions of dollars trying to bury. Internal emails discussing problematic researchers. Financial records showing payments to make complications disappear. And most chilling of all, Elena's own handwritten notes documenting threats against her life if she published her findings. Elena Rodriguez wasn't just a missing person. She was a silenced voice in a cover-up that stretched across 3 countries and involved some of the most trusted names in global healthcare. Her research had uncovered adverse reaction rates 15% higher than what was being reported to regulatory agencies. Data that could have saved lives, prevented injuries, and changed the course of public health policy. But someone decided the world was better off not knowing the truth. The pharmaceutical industry had made Elena Rodriguez disappear because she refused to falsify her data, because she chose scientific integrity over corporate profits, because she believed that parents deserved to know the real risks before making decisions about their children's health. 4 years later, a janitor's accident would finally give Elena her voice back. What he discovered in that hidden compartment would trigger international investigations, topple corporate executives, and reveal the terrifying lengths to which some companies will go to protect their bottom line. This isn't just the story of one missing researcher. This is the story of how far powerful interests will go to silence the truth, and what happens when that truth finally fights back. March 15, 2024, 11:47 p.m. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the empty corridors of Biotech Solutions Madrid as Carlos Mendez pushed his cleaning cart down the familiar hallway. For 20 years, he had walked these same floors, emptied the same trash bins, and wiped down the same laboratory benches where some of Spain's brightest minds worked to develop life-saving medicines. Carlos wasn't a scientist. He didn't understand the complex formulas scrawled on whiteboards or the meaning behind the endless rows of data that filled computer screens. But he understood people. And 4 years ago, he had understood that something terrible had happened to the kind woman who always smiled and asked about his grandchildren in perfect Spanish, despite her busy schedule and mounting pressure from corporate executives. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been different from the other researchers. She never looked through him like he was invisible. She remembered his name, asked about his family, and sometimes stayed late just to chat about life outside the laboratory walls. When she disappeared, Carlos had felt the loss personally. The hallway seemed colder without her warm greetings. Tonight, as he vacuumed the executive offices on the third floor, something fell off. His routine was automatic after 2 decades, but the vacuum cord caught on something unexpected. The filing cabinet behind Dr. Weber's desk shifted slightly, revealing a gap that shouldn't have been there. Carlos stopped the machine and investigated. The heavy metal cabinet had moved just enough to expose what looked like a false panel in the wall behind it. His heart began racing as he realized he was looking at something that was meant to stay hidden. For a moment, he considered walking away. Carlos had a family to feed, grandchildren to support, and 20 years of steady employment at biotech. Curiosity had never been part of his job description, but as he stared at that gap in the wall, he couldn't shake the image of Elena Rodriguez asking him about his grandson's soccer games just days before she vanished. With trembling hands, Carlos pulled the panel aside. Inside was a waterproof container filled with documents, USB drives, and what appeared to be Elena's personal notebook. The first page he opened contained her handwriting. "If something happens to me, these files contain the truth about Project Sanctuary. They threaten my daughter. They threaten my life. But I cannot allow them to bury what I've discovered." Carlos's hands shook as he realized what he was holding. This wasn't just paperwork. This was Elena's insurance policy, her final attempt to ensure that the truth would survive even if she didn't. And now, 4 years later, a night janitor had accidentally stumbled upon the evidence that could change everything. The question was, what would he do with it? Dr. Elena Rodriguez had everything to live for in February 2020. At 34, she was considered one of Europe's most promising vaccine safety researchers, with a mind sharp enough to detect patterns that others missed and an ethical compass that never wavered, no matter the pressure. Her colleagues at Biotech Solutions respected her meticulous approach to data analysis. Her supervisors valued her ability to navigate complex clinical trials. But most importantly, her 7-year-old daughter Sophia adored her. Every morning, Elena would drop Sophia at the International School of Madrid, listening to her daughter's endless stream of questions about everything from why the sky was blue to how vaccines help people stay healthy. Sophia was bright, curious, and completely convinced that her mother was some kind of superhero who made medicine to save the world. Elena's office on the 4th floor of the biotech building was a testament to both her scientific precision and her maternal devotion. Charts and graphs covered one wall, displaying data from the company's latest clinical trials. But her desk held framed photos of Sophia's school plays, soccer games, and science fair projects. A drawing Sophia had made of the two of them in lab coats hung prominently behind her computer monitor. The work itself had become Elena's calling after a childhood tragedy that shaped her entire career. When she was 12, her best friend Carmen had suffered a severe adverse reaction to a routine vaccination. The reaction wasn't documented in any safety literature. It wasn't listed as a possible side effect. Carmen's parents were told it was a coincidence, a rare occurrence that couldn't have been predicted. But Carmen never fully recovered. The bright, athletic girl Elena had grown up with became a shadow of her former self, struggling with neurological issues that doctors couldn't explain or treat. Elena watched her friends' family fight for years to get answers, to find help, to simply be believed when they insisted the vaccination had changed their daughter forever. That experience taught Elena 2 crucial lessons. Vaccines save millions of lives, but honest reporting of adverse reactions saves even more. Every side effect documented could help doctors and families make informed decisions. Every pattern identified could prevent unnecessary suffering. Science worked best when it acknowledged both benefits and risks with equal honesty. At Biotech Solutions, Elena had built a reputation as someone who could be trusted to present data objectively. She never downplayed benefits, but she never minimized risks either. Her reports were thorough, balanced, and scientifically sound. Corporate executives might not have always loved her conclusions, but they couldn't argue with her methodology. Dr. Marcus Weber, her supervisor and former mentor from university, had initially supported this approach. "Elena brings credibility to our research," he would tell board members. "Regulatory agencies trust her work because they know she's not hiding anything." But as pharmaceutical profits soared and regulatory scrutiny intensified, that credibility became both Elena's greatest asset and her most dangerous liability. February 3rd, 2020 started like any other Monday morning in the Rodriguez household. Elena woke at 6:15 a.m. to the sound of Sophia singing in the shower, a habit that never failed to make her smile. Over breakfast, Sophia chattered excitedly about her upcoming science project on the immune system, proudly announcing that she planned to interview her mother for the presentation. "Tell me again how vaccines teach our bodies to fight bad germs," Sophia asked between bites of toast, her dark eyes sparkling with curiosity. Elena explained the concept in simple terms, drawing antibodies on a napkin while Sophia listened intently. These moments reminded Elena why her work mattered, not just for the scientific community or pharmaceutical profits, but for children like Sophia who deserve to grow up healthy and protected. At 7:45 a.m., Elena dropped Sophia at school with their usual goodbye ritual. "Be brilliant today," Elena would say. "Be kind today," Sophia would respond. It was a tradition they'd started when Sophia first began kindergarten, and Elena treasured these small moments of connection before diving into her demanding workday. Arriving at Biotech Solutions at 8:20 a.m., Elena swiped her key card and headed straight to her laboratory. Today was significant. After months of analyzing clinical trial data for the company's new vaccine platform, she was finally ready to compile her safety assessment report. The data told a complex story, one that would require careful presentation to regulatory agencies. Her preliminary findings were troubling. The adverse reaction rates were significantly higher than what had been reported in the initial safety summary. Not catastrophically high, but high enough to warrant additional warnings and monitoring protocols. More importantly, there appear to be patterns in the reactions that suggested certain populations might be at increased risk. Elena spent the morning cross-referencing her data with international safety databases. The patterns held. If anything, her findings were conservative compared to some unpublished reports she'd discovered from similar trials in Germany and the United States. At 11:30 a.m., her phone rang. Dr. Weber's voice carried an unusual tension. "Elena, I need to see you in my office immediately. We have visitors from corporate headquarters." The meeting that followed changed everything. Two executives from Biotech's parent company had flown in from Geneva specifically to discuss Elena's safety report. Their message was clear. The adverse reaction patterns she'd identified were within acceptable parameters and didn't require additional disclosure. Dr. Rodriguez, the senior executive, explained, "Your methodology is solid, but your interpretation is overly cautious. These events fall within normal statistical variation." Elena pushed back politely but firmly. "With respect, the clustering patterns suggest otherwise. We have a responsibility to report these findings accurately." The room fell silent. The executive's smile never wavered, but his eyes turned cold. "Dr. Rodriguez, I think you misunderstand the scope of your responsibilities here." By 2:47 p.m., Elena was back in her laboratory, hands trembling as she typed a text message to her sister. "Publishing today. If anything happens, check my backup drives." She hesitated before hitting send, wondering if she was being paranoid. She wasn't. For years past, Sophia Rodriguez turned 11, then 12, then 13. Her Aunt Maria had tried to create as normal a childhood as possible, but certain questions never went away. Where was Mommy? Why didn't she come home? When would she return? In the beginning, Maria held onto hope alongside the police investigators. Elena was brilliant, resourceful, and deeply devoted to her daughter. Surely she would find a way to make contact, if she were alive. Surely someone who loved Sophia that much wouldn't simply abandon her without explanation. But as months turned into years, hope became a burden too heavy to carry. Maria found herself using different words when neighbors asked about Elena. Missing became gone. Temporarily became we don't know. The future tense became past tense in conversations about Sophia's mother. The bedroom at the end of the hall remained exactly as Elena had left it that Monday morning in February 2020. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her research journals sat stacked on the nightstand. Sophia's latest drawing was still attached to the refrigerator with the same magnet Elena had placed there. At Biotech Solutions, the corporate response was swift and thorough. Dr. Weber was promoted to Elena's position within 3 months, inheriting her projects and research responsibilities. Elena's office was cleaned out, her files transferred to secure servers, and her nameplate quietly removed from the directory. The vaccine safety report that Elena had been preparing was never completed. The concerning adverse reaction patterns she'd identified were buried in classified folders, accessible only to senior management. When regulatory agencies inquired about the missing data, they were told that Dr. Rodriguez had left the company before finalizing her analysis and that her preliminary findings were incomplete and unreliable. Media coverage of Elena's disappearance followed a predictable arc. Initial reports described a promising researcher who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Local television stations featured interviews with worried family members and concerned colleagues. Missing person posters appeared throughout Madrid, showing Elena's warm smile and asking anyone with information to contact police. But public attention spans are short, and without new developments, Elena's story gradually faded from headlines. Within 6 months, her case was relegated to missing person databases and conspiracy theory forums where amateur investigators debated various theories about what might have happened to the idealistic scientist who had simply vanished. Some believed Elena had been recruited by a rival pharmaceutical company and relocated to work on classified projects. Others suggested she had discovered something so dangerous that she'd been forced into witness protection. A few whispered about more sinister possibilities, but those conversations usually ended with nervous glances and changes of subject. The truth was simpler and more terrifying than any theory. Elena Rodriguez had been eliminated because she refused to compromise her scientific integrity. And the system had closed ranks so efficiently that her disappearance barely left a ripple in the corporate world that had ordered her removal. The decision to contact investigative journalist Isabella Santos wasn't one Carlos Mendez made lightly. For 3 sleepless nights after discovering Elena's hidden cache of documents, he had wrestled with questions that kept him awake until dawn. What if he was wrong? What if these documents were fabricated? What if coming forward cost him his job, his pension, his family's security? But every time Carlos looked at Elena's handwritten notes, he saw the fear in her words. The desperation of a mother trying to protect both her scientific integrity and her young daughter. And he remembered the way Elena had always treated him with respect and kindness in a building where most people looked right through him. On March 18, 2024, Carlos made the call that would change everything. Isabella Santos had built her reputation by investigating stories that other journalists avoided. Corporate corruption, pharmaceutical malfeasance, and government cover-ups were her specialty. When Carlos contacted her newspaper and mentioned Elena Rodriguez, Isabella immediately recognized the name from her files. She had tried to investigate Elena's disappearance 4 years earlier, but had hit a wall of corporate lawyers and official silence. The meeting took place in a small cafe near Madrid's Retiro Park. Carlos arrived 30 minutes early, choosing a table in the back corner where he could watch the entrance. When Isabella walked in carrying a leather satchel and wearing a concerned expression, Carlos knew he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. "I need to show you something," Carlos began, his voice barely above a whisper. "But first, you have to promise me that my family will be protected. These people, they make researchers disappear. What do you think they'll do to a janitor?" Isabella's eyes widened as Carlos carefully extracted photocopies of Elena's documents from his jacket. The first page contained Elena's handwriting, a detailed account of corporate pressure to falsify safety data. The second page showed email communications between Dr. Weber and executives at Biotech's parent company, discussing ways to manage the Rodriguez problem. Most disturbing of all was Elena's final entry, dated February 3, 2020. "They've made it clear that Sophia's safety depends on my cooperation. I cannot live with blood on my hands, but I cannot sacrifice my daughter either. I pray that someone finds this and has the courage I lack." Isabella's hands trembled as she photographed each document with her phone. This wasn't just a missing person case. This was evidence of corporate conspiracy, witness intimidation, and quite possibly murder. The implications reached far beyond biotech solutions into the highest levels of international pharmaceutical companies. "Carlos," Isabella said quietly, "do you understand what you've given me? This could bring down entire corporations." Carlos nodded grimly. Dr. Rodriguez was a good woman. She deserved better than silence. Within hours, Isabella's investigation would trigger a media earthquake that would be felt in boardrooms from Madrid to Geneva to New York. Isabella Santos had broken major stories before, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer scope of what Elena Rodriguez's hidden documents revealed. Working 18-hour days from her Madrid apartment, surrounded by printouts, sticky notes, and multiple computer screens, Isabella began piecing together a conspiracy that stretched across 3 continents and involved some of the most trusted names in global healthcare. The first breakthrough came when Isabella's forensic computer specialist, Miguel Torres, successfully decrypted Elena's backup drives. What they found went far beyond adverse reaction data. Elena had meticulously documented a systematic campaign by Biotech Solutions and its parent company, Swiss pharmaceutical giant Meridian AG, to suppress unfavorable safety information across multiple vaccine platforms. Elena's files contained email exchanges between senior executives discussing data optimization strategies and acceptable risk thresholds for regulatory approval. But the language became increasingly sinister as the timeline progressed. References to problematic researchers appeared alongside budget line items for personnel management solutions and compliance enforcement protocols. One email, dated January 15, 2020, from Meridian AG's chief medical officer to Biotech's board of directors, was particularly chilling. Dr. Rodriguez's latest safety analysis presents significant obstacles to our Q2 launch timeline. We recommend immediate implementation of Protocol 7 to address this situation before it becomes uncontainable. Isabella spent days researching Protocol 7, finding no official documentation of what it entailed. But buried in Elena's personal notes was a handwritten translation of corporate euphemisms she had overheard in executive meetings. Protocol 7, Permanent Researcher Reassignment, with comprehensive data retrieval and containment measures. The adverse reaction data Elena had been analyzing told its own horrifying story. Clinical trial participants in Spain, Germany, and the United States had experienced neurological complications, autoimmune disorders, and cardiac events at rates significantly higher than what was being reported to regulatory agencies. Elena had identified specific genetic markers that appeared to predispose certain populations to severe reactions, information that could have led to targeted screening protocols and potentially saved hundreds of lives. But rather than conduct additional safety studies, Meridian AG had chosen to bury Elena's findings and eliminate the researcher who had discovered them. Isabella's investigation revealed that Elena wasn't the first scientist to disappear after questioning pharmaceutical safety protocols. Dr. Andreas Müller, German immunologist, had vanished in 2018 after raising concerns about manufacturing contamination in vaccine production facilities. Dr. Sarah Chun, a Canadian epidemiologist, had died in a suspicious car accident in 2019, just weeks before she was scheduled to present data showing adverse reaction clustering patterns to the World Health Organization. The financial scope of the cover-up was staggering. Isabella traced wire transfers totaling over 50 million euros to offshore accounts connected to corporate security firms, legal teams specializing in reputation management, and what appear to be payments to government regulatory officials in multiple countries. Most disturbing were the communications Isabella discovered between Meridian AG executives and a private security company called Blackwater Solutions, which specialized in executive protection and corporate risk management. Contract documents showed payments for comprehensive researcher monitoring services and specialized personnel solutions for regulatory compliance issues. The timeline of Elena's final weeks became clearer as Isabella analyzed phone records, email logs, and security footage obtained through Freedom of Information requests. Elena had been under surveillance for months before her disappearance. Her phone calls were monitored, her emails were intercepted, and her movements were tracked through her building's keycard system. On January 28, 2020, Elena had attempted to contact colleagues at the European Medicines Agency about her safety concerns. That call was blocked by Biotech's communication system, and Elena's access to external email was mysteriously restricted the following day. Elena's personal notebook revealed her growing awareness that she was being watched. "They know what I found," she wrote on January 30th. "Dr. Weber barely makes eye contact anymore. Security guards follow me to the parking garage. They're preparing something, and I don't think I have much time." Isabella's investigation also uncovered the sophisticated disinformation campaign that had been deployed to discredit Elena's research. Social media accounts with fake profiles had begun circulating rumors about Elena's mental health, suggesting that her safety concerns were the product of paranoid delusions. Academic colleagues received anonymous communications questioning Elena's methodology and professional competence. The most chilling discovery came when Isabella analyzed Elena's calendar and phone records from her final day. At 3:15 p.m. on February 3, 2020, Elena had received a call from someone claiming to be a teacher at Sophia's school, reporting that her daughter had been injured and needed to be picked up immediately. Security footage from the school showed that Sophia had never been hurt. She had spent the entire day in class, completely unaware that her mother was being lured into a trap using her as bait. Elena's keycard records showed her leaving the building at 3:22 p.m. Security cameras captured her running toward the parking garage, clearly panicked about her daughter's supposed injury. That was the last time Elena Rodriguez was seen alive by anyone who cared about her well-being. But Isabella's investigation revealed that Elena hadn't left the building alone. Enhanced analysis of parking garage footage showed two vehicles leaving within minutes of Elena's departure. Her own car and a black SUV with Swiss license plates that had been registered to Blackwater Solutions. The paper trail led to a series of Meridian AG subsidiary companies that owned remote facilities throughout rural Spain. Corporate records showed recent renovations to a compound near Salamanca, including the installation of what were described as specialized medical detention facilities and enhanced security infrastructure. Isabella now had evidence of corporate conspiracy, witness intimidation, and quite possibly kidnapping and murder. But she also understood that going public with these allegations would trigger a legal and financial war against some of the most powerful corporations in the world. The question wasn't whether Elena Rodriguez had been murdered for her integrity. The question was whether Isabella Santos would survive long enough to tell the world the truth. March 25, 2024, marked exactly 4 years and 22 days since Elena Rodriguez had disappeared from Biotech Solutions. Isabella Santos chose that date deliberately when she published her exposé on the front page of El Mundo, Spain's second-largest newspaper. The headline read simply, "The Elena Rodriguez Files: How Big Pharma Silenced a Mother's Warning." Within hours, the story had been picked up by major news outlets across Europe, North America, and Asia. The leaked documents Isabella had obtained through Carlos Mendez painted a picture so damning that even pharmaceutical industry defenders struggled to provide explanations. But the real breakthrough came not from Isabella's investigative work, but from an unexpected source that emerged just 48 hours after publication. Dr. Heinrich Kruger, former head of clinical safety at Meridian AG Swiss headquarters, had been watching the news coverage from his retirement home in Zurich when he recognized Elena's face and story. Dr. Kruger had worked for Meridian AG for 31 years, climbing the corporate ladder through meticulous attention to safety protocols and an unwavering commitment to scientific integrity. But in his final years with the company, he had watched with growing horror as financial pressures began overriding medical ethics. When he attempted to raise concerns about what he witnessed, he was quietly forced into early retirement with a substantial severance package and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The Elena Rodriguez exposé was the catalyst Kruger had been waiting for. At 73 years old, With terminal lung cancer and nothing left to lose, he decided to break his silence. Kruger's phone call to Isabella Santos came at 6:47 a.m. on March 27th. His voice was weak but determined as he explained who he was and what he knew. "Miss Santos, I have been carrying this burden for 4 years. Dr. Rodriguez was not the first researcher we eliminated, and she would not have been the last." What Dr. Kruger revealed during their recorded interview fundamentally changed the scope of Isabella's investigation. Elena Rodriguez hadn't been kidnapped randomly or killed in a moment of corporate panic. She had been systematically targeted as part of what Kruger described as Operation Clean Slate, a comprehensive program designed to identify and eliminate researchers whose work threatened pharmaceutical profits. According to Kruger, Operation Clean Slate had been developed by Meridian AG's board of directors in collaboration with Blackwater Solutions, the private security firm whose invoices Isabella had discovered in Elena's hidden files. The program used sophisticated surveillance technology to monitor researchers across multiple countries, identifying those whose work posed potential threats to product launches or regulatory approvals. They called it risk management, Kruger explained, his voice heavy with regret. But it was systematic suppression of scientific truth. We had files on over 200 researchers across Europe and North America. Elena Rodriguez was classified as a Level 5 threat, which meant permanent resolution was authorized. Level 5 threats, according to Kruger, were researchers whose work could not be discredited, whose methodology could not be challenged, and whose integrity made them immune to bribery or intimidation. Elena fell into this category because her adverse reaction analysis was mathematically sound, her documentation was meticulous, and her motivation was clearly altruistic rather than financial. Kruger provided Isabella with detailed information about the compound near Salamanca, where he believed Elena had been taken. The facility, officially registered as a medical research retreat, had been constructed in 2019 specifically to house what corporate documents referred to as non-compliant personnel requiring extended consultation. The compound's isolation was deliberate. Located 47 kilometers from the nearest village, surrounded by dense forest and accessible only through a single gated road, it provided perfect conditions for what Kruger described as enhanced persuasion protocols. According to internal communications Kruger had retained, Elena was transported to the Salamanca facility on the evening of February 3, 2020. She was not immediately killed, as many had assumed, but rather subjected to months of psychological pressure designed to force her cooperation in falsifying her safety data. The corporate strategy was sophisticated and brutal. Elena was told that her daughter Sophia had been placed under surveillance and would remain safe only as long as Elena cooperated with revising her research conclusions. She was shown fabricated evidence suggesting that her safety concerns had been discredited by other researchers. She was provided with falsified data that appeared to contradict her findings. But Elena Rodriguez proved more resistant than Meridian AG's executives had anticipated. Despite months of isolation, threats, and manipulation, she refused to sign revised safety reports that minimized adverse reaction risks. Her captors had underestimated the depth of her scientific integrity and her commitment to protecting future patients from preventable harm. Kruger's most devastating revelation concerned Elena's final weeks in captivity. By October 2020, corporate executives had concluded that Elena would never cooperate with their demands. Authorization was given for what corporate documents euphemistically termed permanent resolution of the Rodriguez situation. But Elena, despite her circumstances, had managed to gather intelligence about the compound's operations. She had discovered that she wasn't the only researcher being held against her will. Dr. Andreas Mueller, the German immunologist who had supposedly disappeared in 2018, was also imprisoned at the facility, along with 2 other scientists whose public disappearances had been attributed to personal crises or family emergencies. Elena's final act of defiance came on November 15, 2020, when she and Dr. Mueller attempted to escape during a security shift change. The attempt failed tragically. Mueller was recaptured within hours, but Elena made it nearly 3 kilometers through the forest before being cornered by security teams with tracking dogs. What happened next, according to Kruger sources within Blackwater Solutions, was not an execution, but an accident that Meridian AG executives quickly decided to cover up rather than investigate. Elena fell from a cliff face while trying to evade capture, suffering injuries that proved fatal before medical help could arrive. Her body was cremated at a private facility in Madrid, with corporate security personnel present to ensure that no evidence remained. Official death records were never filed. Elena Rodriguez simply ceased to exist in any legal or administrative sense. Dr. Andreas Mueller was released 6 months later after agreeing to sign falsified research reports. He was relocated to a remote village in Argentina with a new identity and a substantial financial settlement in exchange for permanent silence about his experiences. Kruger's revelations provided Isabella Santos with not just the truth about Elena's fate, but evidence of an international conspiracy that had systematically eliminated researchers whose work threatened pharmaceutical profits. The scope of Operation Clean Slate extended far beyond Biotech Solutions or even Meridian AG, involving regulatory officials, government agencies, and academic institutions across multiple countries. As Isabella prepared to publish Kruger's explosive testimony, she realized that Elena Rodriguez had achieved something her killers never anticipated. Her death had created not silence, but the loudest possible alarm about the dangers of corporate control over scientific research. The woman who had refused to falsify her data in life was about to expose the truth in death, triggering investigations that would ultimately bring down the system that had destroyed her. One vaccine researcher who trusted scientific integrity and regulatory oversight proved that even dedicated professionals couldn't escape corporate elimination networks that required government agencies to ignore systematic targeting of ethical scientists for profit. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's hidden documentation finally revealed the communication evidence that pharmaceutical executives thought they had destroyed forever. The encrypted files that exposed years of coordinated researcher suppression became a testament to one silenced victim's courage in exposing corruption within our medical protection systems. How many other scientists have vanished into corporate cover-ups, their disappearances dismissed as career changes or family emergencies? What happens when pharmaceutical profits enable predators to operate without consequences from regulatory agencies? Can medical research survive when silencing whistleblowers becomes more important than protecting public health? Drop a comment below. Do you believe similar networks still target independent researchers who question corporate safety data today? Hit subscribe for more investigations proving that corporate power kills while regulatory silence protects profits.